Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. Today we are talking about Cyberpunk Edgerunners, a new anime based on the Cyberpunk 2077 video game that came out like 2 years ago at this point. So with all that out of the way, let's get into this. Cyberpunk Edgerunners serves as an adaptation/prequel to the video game Cyberpunk 2077 by CD Projekt Red. Animated by Studio Trigger, we follow David Martinez, a young boy growing up in Night City, a future super city ruled by massive megacorporations. He loses his mother, who paid for him to go to a very expensive school by, putting in a lot of extra hours, in a, horrible, tragic drive-by. After finding a secret military-grade augmentation that she had stolen from a massacre site in her duties as an ambulance worker, he decides to use the augmentation as a way to make a living for himself. Recruited into a gang of cyberpunks who act as mercenaries for the black market, he struggles to survive and figure out what he wants to do with his life, eventually finding a new source of family to replace his loss. All in all, it's a pretty standard story, rags to riches, going from losing everything. It's nice. The setting and the characters, though, are really the standout for this story. The story itself is pretty interesting, and it does a better job of exploring the world of Cyberpunk than the game did, which is kind of sad considering the game had like 30 hours of content to do that, and this had, 10 at most. With the premise out of the way, let's go ahead and get on to the characters. First up, we have David Martinez, voiced by Zach Aguilar. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He's an American voice actor, and he does a fantastic job. I had previously known him as Slade Troyard in All Noah Zero, which I still think is a fun ride up until it goes off near the end of the story. He also appeared in Scarlet Nexus, a video game, and Demon Slayer, the movie. So, he has a pretty good record behind him, and he does a fantastic job with David as a character. Next up, we have Emily Lowe as the secondary protagonist, Lucy. She's a young netrunner who ends up finding David after he installs the augmentation. She helps him, learn how to, pick pockets and stuff like that before turning him over to the gang, before they realized he was the son of their buyer, because they were after the augmentation. She serves as his companion and romantic interest throughout the plot, along with her own darker history and relation to the company they get employed by later on, who want them to do a bunch of stuff that ends up forming the main plot thread. In addition, we have Rebecca. She's a trigger-happy edgerunner and a member of Maine's crew, Maine being the one, in charge of the gang. I'll get to him in a second. She's voiced by Alex Cazares in the dub, which is what I watched again. And you've probably seen this character. She's the little girl with blonde hair and the, purple and green eyes, constantly shooting things in all the trailers. She's sort of like the slightly insane gun-happy one. Then we've got Maine. He's the veteran of the crew. He's the giant tank of a guy in charge and sort of serves as a mentor for David when the plot starts out. All in all, the voice actors are just good all around. We've also got, I can't pronounce his name, Giancarlo Esposito as, what was his name? Faraday. And he is from, I don't think I've seen him in anything else. He has a long record of stuff. He was apparently in Maze Runner, The Death Cure, but I don't remember much of that movie. So, anyway, he does a really good job, comes across as very dangerous, sort of like a broker for the super, mega corporations, and eventually a minor antagonist for the plot overall. With all the main characters out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the setting. And Night City is a gorgeous place. The one thing that Cyberpunk 2077 had for its trailers was just this beautiful, mind-boggling city that was always full of unique characters in the background, stuff like that. And while the game itself is a buggy, janky mess, I will admit it did sort of accomplish being a walking tour of a really cool city if you get past that jank. It's just the gameplay sucked. Fortunately for us, this city has amazing action scenes, so that's all taken care of. All the places feel like these very distorted, broken world where you can't really... There's no fixing this. There's the corporations that are taking over. This is over. This is full cyberpunk, people. Corporations are basically the government. We don't even know about any police that are not privatized. This is full-on completely unrestrained capitalism at its worst. Which, that Cyberpunk is pretty good at getting that message across. Moving on from the setting, we have the animation, and this is done by Studio Trigger, and they freaking nailed it. Oh my gods. Studio Trigger is one of those animation studios that can just blow your mind. The action scenes are phenomenal, especially with the super speed augmentation that Martinez gets when we see it. There's one scene where we see him in slow motion doing a fight, and he does like 3 bursts of movement, and then we see it in real time immediately after, and it's literally just like 3 frames. It is insane and gorgeous and beautiful and holy shit. I cannot tell you enough. Watch this if only for the animation. Like, this will just blow your mind. Aside from that, though, being like a gorgeous story with some fun characters and a cool setting, the plot is kind of leaves a bit to be desired. It's pretty standard, basic betrayals. There's really only one twist with one of the characters betraying the others that I really thought was impressive. And even then, it just kind of was like, okay, so you betrayed them? Alright, fine, whatever. The plot itself is kind of standard. And I'm not going to spoil too much aside from that. I just thought the story was just okay. It's probably one of the weaker elements of this for me. All in all, though, this was a pretty good one. So, in conclusion, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a gorgeous show with great animation, good voice acting, and at least a passable story set in a world that I would love to see more of outside of Cyberpunk 2077 because I'm not playing that game. So, I would probably give this a 9 out of 10. Yeah, go check it out. It's one of the better shows this year. Not as good as The Sandman, but, you should already have watched The Sandman, so go ahead and watch this. It's one of the, runner-ups this year. So, yeah. With all that out of the way, let's move into the spoiler section. Don't worry, this is actually not going to be that long. Mostly because there's just not really too much to spoil. So, let's go over some of the basics of this world, just so you can all have a certain understanding. The world of Cyberpunk 2077, this particular story is set a few years before the game, so it's around 2077, in the future. And in their timeline, around our year, I think it was like 2015, 2020, there was a hacker who created like the ultimate virus. And at the time, people actually had already developed AIs and stuff. And the virus was meant to basically shut down and expose massive secrets of all the companies that were plotting to take over the world at the time. He's supposed to like leak all their documents, have the public turn against them, viva la revolution, essentially. However, it kind of went out of control and became a self-aware virus that corrupted and made AIs self-aware. It infected around 95% of the old internet, basically making it unusable. Huge segments of the old net were basically just corrupted mess. And it wasn't even, possible to really shut it down due to the differences in their timeline. So they basically just firewalled most of the internet and restricted how you could access the internet as a whole. Basically, the internet doesn't exist as a massive web of connections spanning the whole planet anymore. All internets are locally contained nets within central cities. So Night City has its own net, and it's essentially enclosed in a massive firewall surrounded by the external internet. This is to prevent any of their connections from being hacked by AI looking to get out of the main net. Basically, if an AI were to get out, it would only be inside one city. It wouldn't be in every city on the planet. And that was the fear. Lucy was actually a project by some of the mega corporations. They were creating net runners, people who could jack into the internet and project themselves virtually to go into the old net and retrieve stuff. But they got attacked by, daemons, which are basically sentient AIs, and most of her group was killed over time. The survivors escaped but were hunted down, and she was believed to be the only survivor. Her dream is to essentially go to the moon and escape the tragedy of their world because she sees everything as a prison because the corporation... She lives in a city where one of the major 2 corporations ruling over it is the one that kept her imprisoned as a child. So it's not hard to see why she believes this place to be a cage of sorts. Martinez gets involved in this when his mother steals a military-grade augmentation from a soldier who went rogue. It was a test project by one of the corporations. The one who runs the school that her son goes to. She was trying to sell it on the black market to pay his fees because she's basically been doing everything she can, taking outrageous shifts because her son, she gets straight A's in school, so she managed to get him into one of the corporation schools. And if she can keep him in the school, she believes that he'll be able to get a job for a corporation, and when you're working for a corporation, you're essentially the 1%. She wants to get him out of the slums, essentially. And that's her dream, is to make sure her son has a better life, and he's kind of taken that as his own dream. But when she dies, he kind of hated school and only did it for her. Like, he's good, he's smart, intelligent, but he hated going there because everyone, treats him like shit because it's a cyberpunk world. And essentially, after she dies, he finds the augmentation and goes to a Ripper Doc to put it in him. This results in him having super speed, which he uses for a bit of petty crime, and also to get back at some bullies. However, he gets spotted by Lucy, who decides to apparently works for Maine, who is the one her mother was selling it for. She leads him on for a while, although she does kind of like him, and eventually gives him to Maine, who's like, why the hell did you steal my drop? And it's like, my mom's dead. It's like, oh, you're her son. Okay, you're Gloria's son. It's like, well, I still need the AUG. It's like, I'll work for you. I'll do it for you. It's like, alright. You'll work it off. And so he gets, to work for the gang. Maine is basically a hugely cyber-augmented person, and the trick is, cyber-augmentations are fine until your body rejects them. Everyone has a different level of tolerance. Some people can handle a few, some people can handle near full-body augmentation, but those are very rare people. Military-grade augmentations are often military-grade because they're experimental, and very few people can withstand having them implanted and using them for long periods of time without some sort of immune response. If you reject it, you start going insane. The cybernetics start breaking down with your body, and you start basically hallucinating and going mad. You no longer have a sense of where you are or what you're doing, and you could think you're like skipping to a field, but you're really mowing down people with machine guns. As a result, cyber psychos, as they're named, are often put down by execution squads the moment they're revealed. Anyone who goes too close to the edge are often called Edgerunners. That's why in Cyberpunk, Edgerunners are essentially the people who augment themselves out the wazoo as mercenaries and are constant risk of going cyber psycho. Later on in the story, as the story progresses, Maine starts taking more and more of the immunosuppressant drug because he started having symptoms. What you're supposed to do is supposed to downgrade and let your body recover, so then once you reclaim your tolerance, you can upgrade again more cautiously, now knowing where your limit is. However, Maine doesn't want to go back to being normal, so he keeps pushing himself, needing more and more of the drug. David has an extremely high tolerance, which allows him to use the military augmentation multiple times a day without degradation. He's warned that if he uses a lot, it could cause problems, but as long as he limits his usage to like 6 to 8 times a day, he should be fine. He does push himself a bit, but he never goes full cyber psycho, because it's really just his only augmentation, and it's just dangerous for him to use it long term. If he overuses it. However, Maine eventually snaps during a job and goes horribly wrong, getting him and his second killed, along with a few others who had died earlier on as this was slowly planning out. This ends up leaving Lucy, Rebecca, David, and the other hacker, Kiwi, who's sort of the veteran hacker who found Lucy and brought her into the gang, as the only survivors. David ends up taking command of the group, along with their driver, Falco, and basically becomes like a legend amongst there, and soon becomes as reputable as Maine a few years later. It time skips after the death of Maine. He gets fully kitted out with new augmentations, and he's doing pretty well, actually. He still hasn't reached his tolerance level. However, he is coming close to it. He hasn't started taking the drug yet, but he might need to if he puts too many new augmentations or doesn't make some lifestyle adjustments. So he's running really close to the edge. I know, Edgerunner, yeah. Roll credits. And basically, they get involved in a job where the dealer ends up tricking them so they can be hunted down by the other rival corporation aside from the Asaka group. So the Asaka group gets the other corporation to want to hunt them down, then tricks them into stealing a shipment of an experimental cyberpunk prototype as they get surrounded by the other corporation who they tipped off about it. As a result, they are put into a situation where David is forced to use the augmentation. All this surrounded in a sort of conspiracy about what was going on, and David being a test subject for them. Because he had gone to the school where one of their CEOs worked, and he realized David had the experimental augmentation, so they've been keeping track of him. Lucy had figured this out when they had hijacked the man's mind during their earlier job that Maine went mad on, and she had been off on sabbatical essentially for a while, trying to keep it all hush-hush and stop the Asaka group from realizing that David was their test subject they were missing. She actually deleted files he had been keeping secret from the rest of the corporation. But she got kidnapped and betrayed by Faraday, and Kiwi, who extracted the information, let the company know, and now they're using David as a test subject. It's basically this giant mech suit, and as he's putting it on, he got a fake call from Lucy, who was hacked by Kiwi and Faraday. But afterwards, she managed to get a message. I was like, no. And he's already like halfway through the procedure at this point, because it's in a truck designed to equip it to somebody, to perform the surgery. It's basically an auto dock, and it's just like, oh, dude, this is so suspicious. And Kiwi was there. She like convinces him to do it. And then midway through, he realizes Lucy gets kidnapped. She tells him not to do it. He's like, I'm already doing it. So they bust out. Now, Asaka had expected him to lose control and go full Cyber Psycho beforehand, but he had actually acquired some heavy military-grade suppressor and is essentially injecting it into himself. However, the suppressor isn't stopping the Cyber Psycho condition, it's literally just delaying it. And the doc told him, if you use more than one of these, you're not going to be suppressing it, you're going to be putting it aside. And you can keep having these things come in as the condition comes back, but once it comes back in full, you're going to get hit with all of it at once, and your mind will shatter into pieces. Like, if you just stop now, you might be able to survive. If you use all of these, you are essentially forever lost. Your mind is going to be a mental wreck. He ends up charging their base and fighting this other legendary mercenary in this, like, really cool battle. I cannot stress this enough. The final battle was awesome. And in the end, only Lucy and Rebecca managed to get out alive. Lucy ends up using the money from the job to go to the moon colony to finally escape the surly bonds of Earth, a segment of freedom. There was this whole thing earlier on where she and David went to this hollow vid of being on the moon, and, it was like one of their main bonding moments. So, that's basically it. The story is pretty basic and short. Basically all the protagonists die aside from Lucy and Rebecca. And I think Falco also might have lived. I'm not sure. I forget whether he survived or not. But he left, earlier before, the final battle, I think. Anyway, it all just kind of came crumbling down. David was already screwed the moment his mom, even before his mom got shot. He was screwed long before that, because he had gotten this offer to, come back to school if he apologized. It was revealed the tech CEO wanted the augmentation back without the rest of the company knowing, and he had found out David used it due to security footage of the fight with his son. So, even if he had come back, though, he would have just ended up being turned into, a worker drone for Asaka or a test subject. It wasn't an offer made out of kindness. And that's kind of the message of the whole show, is, a lot of these characters were kind of screwed from the start. But they didn't let that define them and reached out for their own dreams, never giving up. Which, is mildly hopeful, although it has a bit of, grimdark to it. So, yeah. With all that said and done, let's move on to the announcements. So, announcements. We have 3 things coming up. So, we have a game, Steel Rising. I've already finished it. I'm working on the review now. It should be up either this weekend or next Tuesday, depending on if I get time. Then, after that, next upload will be the Scholomance series, Book 3, The Golden Enclaves. I've been looking forward to this one all year, and I have mixed things to say about it, but I won't. It was good, let's just say that, and I do want to talk about it. Finally, number 3, we have Werewolf by Night, which is going to be a TV special exclusive for Disney Plus as a part of Phase 4 of the MCU. It's apparently going to use, black and white cinematography and practical effects and stuff like that. So it's a really interesting idea. I've liked it. It's Halloween. Werewolves are one of my favorite movie monsters. We're going to see Michael Myers sometimes later this, year, and that Halloween ending for real thing, so whatever. But this is the horror movie I'm kind of looking forward to. In addition to all of my reviews coming up, if you did not know, I stream on Twitch as part of the Dragon's Arcade. If you would like to watch us, starting next week for the rest of October, I will be doing a playthrough of Bloodborne. I know, it's a really old game, but it's also one of my yearly pleasures. Every year, during October, I play Bloodborne. Since I'm streaming this year, I decided, what the hell, let's go ahead and play it on stream. So, yeah, if you're looking forward to that, want me to play my favorite Soulsborne game, check me out. There's a link in the description, or you can just look us up as The Dragon's Arcade on Twitch. I stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. With that, our announcements are concluded. Hope you enjoyed the video. On your screen, you should be seeing a link to my channel. If you go there and subscribe, that'd be great. In addition, you'll be seeing 2 other links. One's to my Season 2 playlist. That's all the videos from 2022. In addition, below that, you should be seeing a link to a video that YouTube apparently recommends you click on. So, why not click on it? see one of my other videos. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe it'll have something else you'll enjoy. Maybe YouTube doesn't know shit. We'll find out together.